What's up guys and welcome back to another video. Today I've got the second installment of the Keep Sell Loan series. In the last video I did the goalkeepers and the centre backs, and for today's video I'll be doing our fullback options going into next season. Now I'm not going to be covering all of Chelsea's options at fullback. As I said in the last video, I'm not going to be covering players in the loan army that are purely a source of income at this point, Bubba Ruckman being case in point for the fullbacks. I'll also be dropping 2 more videos talking about the midfielders and the forwards, and then we can get back to all the juicy transfer stuff that we all know and love. And lastly, just before we get into things, I'm just going to remind you guys, this is what I would do if I was in charge, and not what I think Tuchel and the club are going to do. So with that being said, let's jump straight into it. Alright, we may as well go from right to left and start things off with the right backs. And what better place to start than the club captain himself, Azpilicueta. Now, Azpi didn't have his best season on a personal level last year. Obviously, he completed his Chelsea trophy cabinet with the Champions League winners medal, and there's no more deserving player than him, and it was great to see him finally lift that trophy after so many years at the club. He did, however, find himself out of the team at points last season. Under Lampard, Reece James was the preferred option on the right. And this isn't something we've really seen with Azpi, as he's pretty much been a nailed-on starter since he arrived from Marseille. That being said, though, I would definitely be keeping Azpi at the club for at the very least another year. He might not be the most vocal captain. He's certainly not that John Terry-esque character, but he's the consummate professional, and I think it's vital for that reason that we do keep him around. He's more than earned the privilege to do whatever he wants. If he wants to stay at Chelsea in the future for the rest of his career, then you let him. I think you offer him those 1 to 2 year rolling contracts and let him stay until he retires. If he wants to leave to return to Spain, then you allow him that. However, if he is to stay, he will need to accept that he's not going to be getting those 38 games a season that he's used to, now that he's getting on a little bit, and the long-term future of his position is already at the club in Reece James. And if he's fine with that, then there's really no reason to be letting him go. He's the perfect tutor for someone like Reece James, for example, who he can help on the defensive side of his game, where sometimes his positioning can leave a little bit to be desired, and Azpi's reading of the game is arguably his best attribute. So for reasons like that, Azpi is 100% a keep for next season. Alright, next we'll do, as I said before, what seems to be the long-term replacement for Azpi in that right back and right centre back position, and that's Reece James. Now, this one's a no-brainer. If anyone thinks anything other than keep for Reece James, then I don't know what to say to you. Football obviously just isn't the sport for you. If his performances in the Champions League final couldn't convince you that he's Chelsea's first-choice right-back for the next 10 or so years, then I don't know what will, honestly. He's just been on a constant upward trend for the past 2 years, with him peaking at just the right time in the Champions League final. And I remember when Tuchel first came in and he was dropped for that Wolves game, and people were waffling on about how this is the end for the Chelsea youngsters, even though Hudson-Odoi took his place in the starting 11, who's even younger than him. And since then, he's featured in every single game under Tuchel, in all competitions, whether that be off the bench or from the start, which just goes to show how important he is to the team. And I can't see a world in which he doesn't continue on this upward trajectory throughout his career. He's got his head screwed on right, and it wouldn't surprise me if in 3 or so years, Mason Mount was our club captain and Reece James was our vice captain. And having those 2 academy boys, our captain and vice captain, would be sick, and it would send a really positive message to future academy graduates. And I mean, the man can also pretty much play everywhere. We've seen him play right back, centre back, centre mid. I think he's come on at left back, and judging by how he can hit a fucking ball, I reckon he'd do a pretty solid job up front. You never know, if we can't get Haaland, maybe give him a shot. And I think the versatility that he offers Tuchel is just always going to work in his favour. So no questions asked, 100% Reece James is a definite keep. The last right back on my list is Zappacosta. Now, I know what you're going to be saying. Realistically, there's no chance of him ever playing for Chelsea again, and he's just that source of income that I was talking about before. So why are you talking about him? And yes, you're not wrong, but we did spend £28 million on the shitter. So for that reason, I'm going to be slating him in this video, as I think that's the least he could do to repay us. And just quickly, I will state the obvious before any of you get the wrong idea. Yes, he's a definite sell. And now that's out of the way, I'll continue the slander. Now, I think it's gone under the radar just how bad of a transfer this was. He came in during that famed window where Marina had to be going through some midlife crisis or something because she just signed an enormous pile of shit that summer. Drinkwater, Emerson, and Zappacosta. What a trio that is. And I think he's almost on the level of Drinkwater in terms of the shittest transfers we've ever made. The only difference being he's been hiding in the Serie A for the past 3 years while Danny Drinkwater's resorted to beating up kids in the under 23s. Alright, now I've had my fun, and I'm sure Zappacosta has too. It really is time to sell him and try to recoup any of that stupid £28 million we spent on him. I don't know if you'd be able to get anything more than the odd like 5 million for him, but at this point you just take it and move on this summer. I think he's only got 1 year left on his contract. And I think this summer we try our best to get rid of all the shit that was brought in during that window. And what better place to start than Zappacosta, honestly. So Zappacosta, sell for me. Right, moving on from one pile of shit to another. That's probably a little harsh on Emerson. He's not been that bad, but he's been a disappointment nonetheless. And I remember in the summer when he signed, we had been heavily linked with a move for Alexandru all window, which would have been a great signing at the time. And then out of nowhere, Emerson just turns up for 20 million. And if these last two have proven anything, it's don't sign average wingbacks from the Serie A. Because neither were that bad in Italy. They were both decent. But when they came to us, they just couldn't get themselves into the team. I mean, Zappacosta couldn't get a game over Moses, who's now in Russia. And for Emerson, it stayed that way ever since. He's always just been a backup option, even if the first choice was to play in Alonso in a back four, which is never a good sign. And it's definitely time for him to go. He's probably had a handful of good games for Chelsea, with the only real memorable moment coming in the Champions League against Atletico. And I think there's probably plenty of suitors in the Serie A for him. Every window, he's linked to about half the teams in the league. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did move there and do pretty well, but he just hasn't really done it for us. And it's now time to move on and open up a pathway for a younger player to come through, which I'll talk about later on in the video. So Emerson for me is a sell. We've got a bit of a trend going on here, eh? Another fullback who we signed from the Serie A, Marcus Alonso. Now, this one's a little tougher than the Emerson one, although I don't actually think Alonso is that much of a better player than Emerson. I just think he suits Tuchel's system a lot better. And I think the only time Emerson's ever played under Tuchel, he played left centre-back, and when he came on at like left attacking midfielder in that Atletico game. So Alonso definitely has the advantage of the two in that department. He fits the system a lot better. That being said, though, if this was up to me, I would also look to sell Alonso if possible. Since the first 2 seasons under Conte, his performance levels, the opposite to Reece James, just seem to be dropping season after season. And with Chilwell having fully adapted to that left wing-back role towards the end of the season, I don't see a need to keep Alonso around. He's such a specialised player, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I don't know. But I don't even think he performs that well when he is deployed as a left wing-back anymore. We all know how subpar he is at left-back, and people's defence of him was always the performances he was putting in as a wing-back. But for me, over the past 2 seasons or so, he doesn't even stand out in that position anymore. And like he did under Conte, and he's now 30. So if the option was there with Emerson, I'd look to get rid of him to open up the pathway for a younger player to come through. Now, that being said, though, Tuchel does seem to be a fan of Alonso. We've heard him talk about his height and what that brings to the team. And I mean, I understand the argument, but Chilwell himself isn't bad in the air. So for me, it's not the greatest argument in terms of keeping him at the club and letting him go. And I just think we don't need his specialisation as much anymore. And when we eventually do switch to a 4 at the back, whether that be under Tuchel or under a different manager, he's just going to become a bona fide cheerleader again like he was under Lampard. And I still think he'd generate a decent amount of interest from Spain. There were reports that Barca wanted him during January last season. So if we're able to get a decent fee for him, I would sell Alonso this window, as unlikely as I think that'll be. I think he'll stick around and be that backup option because Tuchel just seems to rate him. Alright, now we'll get into a left back I actually want to keep at the club, which is a short list apparently, and that's Chilwell. Now, Chilwell was superb last season. I think he should be in the contention for signing of the season. I think that probably goes to Mendy, but Chilwell is definitely up there with Thiago Silva and Mendy in contention. Now, the biggest compliment I think you can pay to him is no one's talking about Alex Tellez and Reguilon like they were last summer. People were talking about how much we overpaid for Chilwell and how stupid it was that we didn't go for the cheaper options in Alex Tellez and Reguilon. And now look, Tellez can't buy a game at United over Luke Shaw, and Reguilon was, okay in a shit Spurs team, which just goes to show you that sometimes paying that Premier League tax is worth it, especially if you want the instant success that Chelsea craves. And hey, it worked. Chilwell was incredible in the Champions League final. Probably his best game in a Chelsea shirt. He kept Mahrez quiet for the full 90 minutes. He's just got such an engine getting up and down the touchline. He offers the same attacking output as Alonso without the complete lack of any defensive work rate. And he's also integral to the way we play at the moment under Tuchel. We seem to focus our attacks down the right and then quickly look to switch the ball to the left, where Chilwell normally is, in acres of space. And he's normally got acres of space to work with. And if he's just able to improve his end product just a tiny bit, sometimes his crossing and final pass can leave a bit to be desired, although you could probably say that for just about everyone in the Chelsea team. But if he can improve on that a little bit, I think next year he could rack up the assists. And he's been nailed on all season, besides that little patch when Tuchel first came in and he was out of the team when he was learning that left wing back role. But now he's got that nailed down. There's absolutely no reason to sell him. Not that there really was one anyway. So 100% keep for Chilwell, and a great piece of business from Chelsea. Alright, now this is my little wild card for the video. We had one in the last video with Mark Gurhey, and today's little wild card is going to be Ian Maatsen. So he was on loan at Charlton in League One last season, where he made 34 appearances, got 1 goal and 3 assists. Now, for Maatsen, for me, there's only 2 options with this. As I said before, I would sell Alonso and Emerson, which would leave us needing a left back. And I wouldn't be opposed to keeping Maatsen at the club as that backup for Ben Chilwell, but I think there's probably a 0% chance of that actually happening, as Tuchel seems to be a huge fan of Alonso, as I said before. A fan club which seems to be diminishing in members every single season, may I add. And realistically, he's probably going to stay as a rotation option for Chilwell, which would mean finding Maatsen a new loan move. Now, I'm sure there'd be many suitors for him after his impressive debut campaign in League One. He's a modern fullback, he's very comfortable on the ball, and he's extremely versatile. He's played at left back, centre back, and central midfield throughout his youth career. And I think he even played on the right wing for Charlton at points last season. Now, Charlton themselves apparently want to take him back for another season, but I think it's important that he keeps progressing with these loan moves and doesn't stagnate, as we've seen with so many Chelsea youngsters in the past who just keep going on loan moves back to the same level. So I would look to potentially loan him abroad, as I don't know how many championship clubs would be willing to give him a chance just due to his size. He's very small. And I think a loan move to Germany would be ideal for him to continue his development. And we've got a good track record when it comes to loaning players there. The first one that comes to mind is Christensen. So for Maatsen, I'm going to go with loan because I don't think I'm fully convinced that he's ready for the first team, and he probably needs another year out on loan. However, if he was to stay as that rotation option, if Emerson and Alonso were to go, I wouldn't be mad about it. So loan if those two stay, but potentially keep as a backup option if those two were to leave the club. That's all I've got for you guys in today's video. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't, to stay notified for when I upload new videos. I've got the final 2 parts of this coming up with midfielders and forwards. So subscribe to stay up to date with those, and thanks for watching.